Finally, somebody else went crazy, and I had nothing to do with it. Don't blame me for none of that. We're going to be over in Matthew chapter 5. You can thank Laura Stam for today's lesson. What? Wow. Oh. She said this. She just said this phrase a couple times this week when I was around her, and it just kept coming back. So I said, "Okay, God, that's what we'll talk about, and we'll see." And you know what? I honestly thought I had already done a sermon on this, and I thought, well, you know what? It's going to be an easy week. I'll just go find one of my old sermons from a long time ago, and you won't know the difference. Then last night, Paul said, well, just do one from last week. They won't remember that either. That wasn't very nice. That wasn't very nice at all. So I started searching for my sermon. I hadn't done one. At least that I know of. Or if I did, God deleted it. Yeah, we know Jesus saves, but we're kind of sure God deletes when he wants to. So we're gonna kind of go through this just kind of new and fresh because that's just where we are. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. We've been talking for a couple weeks. We talked about how God needs to be experienced, not just explained. You're never going to convince someone with your words to follow Christ. I'll tell you something, and this might sting a little. If you just talk someone into following Christ, statistics tell us that 8 out of 10 times they simply told you what you wanted to hear to shut you up. Seriously. We can't convince people with just our words, to follow Christ. He's not one that needs to be explained. We don't need to explain Jesus. God's much bigger than that. We need people to experience Jesus. We need people to see. So we talked a few weeks ago about you having people come and see. Come and see what you have found. Come and see who you're following, why you're following this guy from 2,000 years ago who was a carpenter, and what's so different about you. Come and see it. And I told you not just invite them to church, but invite them into your life. Come and see my life. Come and see what's going on with me and why, okay? And then that gets them to experience Jesus, and then they will go and they will do the same thing. We left 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they were the guys, Jesus' followers. You remember, he started with 0. John had 2, and he had 0, and then Jesus had 2, and John had 0. So they kind of switched, and Jesus took his disciples on a journey, and as they started to follow him and built in, he says, we're going to go to Galilee. So a couple weeks ago, they took off, and they were going to Galilee. What happened is a lot of people started to hear about what was going on. As people were experiencing Jesus, it caught on. Understand that the things that Jesus was doing, people were watching, okay? There wasn't gospel going out yet. I mean, he hadn't even sent out the 72 yet, okay? So it was people coming and checking out Jesus and what happened and experiencing things, watching what he had done. So this word, and then there was the going and telling, hey, you need to go check out what's going on with Jesus. You need to experience it yourself. I can't explain it. I can't explain it. I would submit that if you can explain Jesus, you might not have a good grasp on Jesus as you think. Because Jesus is one of those things I told you week 2 about, he's kind of like a Krispy Kreme. You get to the point where you're just like, you're just going to have to try it. I can't tell you anymore, okay? And that's Jesus to me, Krispy Kreme Jesus. We'll just call him that if you have to. Whatever it takes to help you remember, right? Whatever it is. So these multitudes had started to gather around Jesus, and he was performing miracles, and things were happening. It was crazy, crazy, crazy. Well, Jesus gathers these people together, and he has the most famous sermon ever written, and we call it the Sermon on the Mount. Yeah, it was down in a valley. Okay, catch up. Come on. Sermon on the Mount. It's on a mountain, okay? So he gathers everybody around him, and he begins to tell them some things. He wants to teach them some things about what they're actually going to look like, a value system that was different. He talked to them about a people who was going to be merciful, He talked to them about people who's going to be compassionate. He talked to them about people who were going to stand up for what is right, who was going to do different than what they had seen before, a new value system, different than any other on the planet. And as then he shifted from this value system, and he looks at his disciples, and he says, and now I'm going to tell you about two roles that you're going to play. And I believe the disciples probably got excited at this because as a disciple, they wanted to know what their part was. I mean, wouldn't you? Haven't you? At some point said, what's my part in this Jesus movement? What am I supposed to do for God's kingdom? How am I supposed to fulfill my role? What am I supposed to do? Well, good news. He already told you your role. And I know you want specifics. Tough. Okay? Jesus told us what did your pacifier left. We'll get it. Oh, she got another one. She's still on kid 2. She's got extra pacifiers. Kid 4, that pacifier would have been picked up, right back in his mouth. First and second, baby, you carry extras and everything. But we want to know, what am I supposed to do now that I'm a believer? What should I be doing? You know, how should I be filling in the gaps in this Jesus thing? And what does Jesus want me to do? Well, I'm going to tell you, he already told us, it is kind of general. It is, but it is every day. It's what you're supposed to do every day. So he breaks it down. Here's what he says first. Matthew chapter 6, or Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. It says, you're the salt of the earth. You're the salt. That's you and me. And to the disciples. Now, it means a little different now than it did then. Salt. What is salt? So I started really thinking about the analogy. I've heard tons of sermon on being salt. Haven't you? Anybody? Tons means you've been in church a lot. Okay. So yeah, we've heard tons of sermons on salt. So I'm like, what? What is he talking about? I did some research. I picked up some others' research. First thing salt does, what's it do? Preserves, especially to these guys. Salt's a preservative. I'm like, what's that mean to me? How am I a preservative? So you are the preservative of the earth. And I'm like, wow, that's big shoes to fill. But you preserve. So what does preserve do? It keeps decay from happening. Oh, hold on. So as I'm out in the world and I've got people that I'm with, I'm supposed to preserve them. I'm supposed to keep them from decay. I'm supposed to help them in their life so that their life doesn't decay. So that they are preserved, that good things are preserved, that are carried on. Example, if someone has trouble with their marriage, kind of talked about marriage in Sunday school this morning, so this is a good example. Someone's having trouble in their marriage. If I'm the salt, I'm supposed to help them preserve it. I'm supposed to help them keep it from decaying. Well, how do you do that? You're the salt. You get to come in. You get to be right alongside them. In a sense, it's weird. You get to rub salt all over it. Yourself, you're the salt. You see, Jesus isn't the salt. You're the salt. So, for you to preserve, you've got to be there. You've got to be out there. You've got to be engaged with people. You've got to be touching lives. You've got to be involved in people's lives. You've got to know about them. You have to have good, deep relationships with people. Salt is not something that we're just going to get scattered around. They didn't scatter salt when Jesus was talking to them. They placed it where it needed to be, sometimes in concentrated levels, but they placed it. And see, Jesus has placed you exactly where he wants you to be to preserve and keep from decay people around you. You've got to do it. Well, I stopped there. You don't have to do it. You already will do it. As you follow Christ and you listen to him and you obey him and you do all those things, you will automatically be the salt. You see, we use salt to season for taste. We just want to dabble a little. We just want to put a little bit here and a little bit there. These guys, not so much. These guys, they didn't have quite as good access to salt as you and I do. They didn't just get to reach over and grab some. They didn't even go to salt mines and get it like we do today. They pulled their salt from reeds, roots, in salt marshes, really close to the Dead Sea. What would happen is they'd pull those roots out, and that's what they would rub on the meats, and they would dabble it on there, and they would just keep doing it. And then they would store that meat. The next time, they would get some other meat. They would take that same set of reeds, and they would brush it kind of on there. And then they would do some more, and do some more, do some more. Therefore, preserving. So that stuff became very valuable. Salt's pretty valuable, at least to them. Actually, it's invaluable. You're the salt of the earth. You're invaluable to the earth. That's why God placed us here, because we're invaluable to Him. We have purpose and value. Have you ever bumped up into or maybe some of you, that's how you got here. Maybe you bumped up against a salty Christian. Maybe you were working with one, or you just met one, and you noticed that their lives was a little different than yours. But you shared the same problems, but you didn't respond to them in the exact same way. That's salty. Maybe you were struggling somewhere, and you were both struggling alongside, but for some reason there was this almost peace. There wasn't a huge worry in their life. And you watched that, and you were like, man, what is that? I mean, maybe you even said to them, you should be in pieces by now. And that person was able to look back at you and go, yeah, I probably would be if I was doing this on my own. If I didn't have, see, you got open right there. Got open. They had experienced your salty life. And then you were able to tell them how. Maybe you've seen someone, and maybe that's how you got here. Maybe you saw how they treated their wives and their families, and you're like, whoa, I want that in my house. I want that to happen. Maybe you watched them conduct business, and when there was an opportunity to even be a little gray, they decided, nah. And it even may have cost them, but they didn't care. They just kept moving along. You were like, whoa. Maybe you looked at their life and you were like, man, even when I do the gray areas, I feel so guilty, or I'm always looking over my shoulder, worried about getting caught. And that person was able to look at you and go, see, I don't have that. Because I follow A, and they started in. See, you experienced saltiness, and then they were able to explain what that meant. See, those qualities give them credibility with you, Christians. You who are salty, you have credibility. You're the salt. Look, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? Now, before we get all scientific, which we're not going to anyway, Jesus clicked into something here you already understand. You see that credibility that you have, that saltiness? If you do things that you lose that credibility, you understand just how hard it is to get back. You understand, Christians, that whenever you're living out your life and you're being salt to the earth, and people are watching you and you're helping them gain things, and you just misstep, and you drop your guard, or you stop following, and you lose some of that credibility, you understand just how hard it is to get it back, because they will always remember the time you messed up. Jesus said, how hard is it to get that saltiness back? How hard? It's no longer good for anything. We won't drill right there because that makes everybody nervous. Except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. But that's the cool thing about this. We know that salt in its own thing, sodium chloride, is a stable structure, stable compound. You can't make it less salty. You can't destroy its saltiness. in its pure form. But these guys, remember the reeds, the root stuff? The marshes, when they pulled them up, it was all mixed with impurities. It wasn't just salt. And as they used it, or they washed it, or it got rained on, the impurities washed away the salt, because salt's soluble. And so these salty reeds that he's talking about, the impurities inside of them actually diluted the saltiness. Now the salt just got pushed down. The salt just went back into the water. Salt just went back into the ground. It's still there. You understand that if you took a glass of water and you dissolved a bunch of salt in it and you're like, oh, see, it's gone. If you set that glass out and let the water evaporate, what do you got left? Salt. It didn't go anywhere. It's always going to be there. You can salt that glass of water. You can evaporate it out. You can salt another glass of water. You can evaporate. You just keep going. Doesn't matter. So that salt's still there. It's just diluted down into the ground. What's that mean for you? How do you relate to that? Well, think about those impurities. The more impurities that get put into your life, that you just kind of dabble around in, those impurities wash away your saltiness. They take it with them. They take it down. Still there. It's still salt. Jesus didn't go anywhere. But it gets washed out, washed down. They actually threw their reeds away. That's what gets thrown out and trampled underfoot. When they would test those reeds, maybe they licked them, whatever they did. They're like, that's not salt anymore. They just threw them over there on the ground. And it became their reed floors. It became the stuff that they walked on, trampled underfoot. Nothing else. You couldn't use those things for anything else. No other value. And see, look, the world, when you lose your credibility, the world throws you out. And they don't ever come back to you. They might as well trample you underfoot. You've seen it. You're seeing it now. You're watching it happen. You understand this. The world is not turning away from Jesus, folks. The world's turning away from you. The world's turning away from me because we've lost our saltiness. Jesus didn't get worse. He didn't get less salty. They're turning away from us. We're the salt. We're the ones being thrown out because they don't trust us anymore. So I challenge you, look at your life. What are they seeing? Do they want what you've got? Or would they rather turn away from you? Are they better off without you? Even as a Christian, think about it. This is weird. This is hard to get. But the people around you either want what you've got or they don't, and they're throwing you out, and you're just as useless as the dirt under their feet. And it's all about how you salt the earth. Okay, so it preserves, and I kind of told you were infinite value. Yeah, salt has huge value. You need to have value in this world. Once again, if they don't see your value, they just throw you out. Listen, back then when they said the word salt and Jesus called his disciples salt, they were like, whoa, huge compliment. Salt was actually used for money. The Roman soldiers were actually paid in salt. The word Latin is salarium. We get the word salary from it. It all goes right back to right here. Soldiers getting paid in salt. You've still heard probably somebody in your life say whether someone is or isn't worth their salt. That's why. They got paid in amounts of salt. So when you call a disciple salt, you're giving them a huge compliment. You're telling them you do have value. And that's what Jesus did. And that's what he's saying to you. You have value. So they have infinite value. You have infinite value. You're a preservative. What else are you? Did you know that salt's used to promote thirst? You ever heard that? You need to go home and Google that if you haven't heard it. In arid climates and in sports competitions, salt's used to encourage or to promote thirst. So I'm looking at these salt analogies, and I'm like, Jesus, what are you what are you telling me? I am supposed to be out there promoting thirst. They should want. Have you ever ate a food and you were like, man, this would be so much better if I had some salt? Yeah. What he's telling us is, as you're living your life, the people looking at you and looking at their life, they should be looking at their life going, this would be so much better with what they got. This would be so much better if I did it like they did it. My life would feel, I think I'd be having a much better time if I lived like them. You should be promoting this thirst for it. Titus 2:9, Paul tells a bunch of Christian servants that they must act in such a way that they may adorn the doctor of God, our Savior, in our things. Adorn. Put it on. And you do that so that people look at you and want. Women, don't go crazy here, but you put on, you adorn, the same word for makeup, so that people will look at you and want to be around you, to like you, if you're single, to date you, whatever. Adorn. But Paul says, adorn the doctrine. Adorn God. Put him on so that people will want. They will thirst. You're salt so that people will thirst for what you've got. I don't know what they have, but I want it. I want it. I got to have it. And then lastly, you got to have contact. Salt does. What I found out is salt doesn't do anything in the shaker. Doesn't do anything in the cabinet, right? Have you ever noticed that if you take salt and you shake it on your plate next to your food, nothing really happens. It's just useless. I mean, it's there, and you'll finish the rest of your food, and the salt will kind of be sitting there. It won't do any good. Same way. You can't just go out in the world and try not to bump into people. Try not to let them touch it. No, don't touch me. No. No, you scare me. You scare me. I'm not having dealing with you. You scare me. Well, good. You kept yourself from being scared, but you also kept them from getting salty. No, I don't. I'm not going there. I'm really, whatever reason. Well, good. You kept yourself secure. You kept yourself pure, whatever. But you also kept them from getting salty. You have to come in contact with the people that God has placed you near so that you can get on them. So that you can influence them. So that your salt just kind of gets into their lives. And it does its job. Whether it's to be preserved or whether it's to promote thirst or whatever it is, it's got to get there. And spitting salt doesn't necessarily do it. You don't have salt. You are salt. Get it? You're not spreading the salt. You are the salt. So you have to be living this thing out. Listen, if our church becomes a salt warehouse where we just kind of hang out and stuff, we missed it. And we missed out on the lesson that salt has to come in contact with those it affects. All right, we're going to try to finish today. Because you're not just salt. There's more. He says, and you're the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. So I'm salt. I'm supposed to be out there. I'm supposed to be doing. But I'm also light. Do you notice there's no such thing, or do you know that there's no such thing as darkness? Technically speaking. Darkness is simply the absence of light. That's all it is. Light is everything. It's kind of like, is it cold? There's nothing. There's no heat. It's only absence of cold, or one or the other. Yeah, there's no heat here. We know that. Same way with light. So light is everything. The only way for you to have darkness is to cover up the light. So what Jesus is saying is, you are the light of the world. Now, I got confused when I read that, because who's really the light of the world? Yeah, there you go. Good answer. Always in church. Amanda, y'all, Sherry Ann, y'all got it. Jesus. Good. Jesus. So if Jesus is the light of the world, now I'm the light of the world, I'm confused. You got to think of it like this. You're the moon. Y'all understand the moon doesn't have any light. But if you've ever been out on a full moon day, full moon night, it's like it's day. It's like it's just as bright as it is at the day. Kind of. Not quite. You don't get everything, but you get the light. That's you. Because the moon doesn't put off any light. It's simply a great big old reflector. It just takes all the light it can gather from the sun, and it bounces it down to us. We don't get everything. We don't get the heat. We don't get everything you can get, but we get the reflection of the light. That's you. You're like a moon. And as God shines His light on you, you then reflect it unto people. You're merely a reflection of who Jesus is. So as people see you, they can't get everything from you. Understand that. But they can see the reflection of God. They can understand who He is. They can understand that there's something in you that's not you, and then you can point them to where it's at. Because if you go up to the moon, you can see the sun. You understand that? So when people come to you, they should be able to see the sun. Because you're reflecting sunlight. Preacher joke. I don't get a lot of them, but that was good. So this light dispels darkness. That's you. When you're talking to people, when you're dealing with people, darkness is all around them. And as you throw light out there with your life, and now your words, the darkness gets dispelled. And people are like, really? That's what I've been missing? Oh, that makes sense. I could do that. Finances. You know, people are struggling with their finances. And they're having trouble. And then you come in and they're looking at your life, and you've lived it, and you've shown them, and it's cool. And now they're asking you, you're like, well, here's what I would do. And they're like, oh, didn't see it that way. Darkness dispels. You got a friend who's having trouble in their marriage. Yeah. What would you do? Well, this is what I would do. Oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. That'll work. What is it about your life that you're supposed to be salt and light of to people around you? You see, there's a direct relationship between what you believe and what you do. The world knows that what you do is really what you believe. So it doesn't do any good to tell people what you believe. If you simply do it, they then know what you believe. Verse 16. Is that, no, did I jump? Let's see what fitting. They need to light a lamp, put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand that gives light to everyone in the house. That's pretty cool, because people back then, they put lights on stands, and they strategically placed them around the house so that everybody got usable light. That's cool, because God did that to you. He's placed you in a spot to give off His usable light, okay? But He's put you in a specific spot. All right, so then 16 says, in the same way, let your light shine for others, so that, see why, here's why I'm salt, here's why I'm light, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. They see what you do, and then they glorify the Father in heaven. See what you do, glorify God. Why didn't He say, hear what you say? Once again, they don't believe you. People don't believe what you say. People believe what you do. Jesus understood that. Let them see your good deeds, and in doing that, they then will glorify your Father in heaven. Not you. You're not going to glorify the Father in heaven. You're glorifying the Father in heaven by doing the deeds. Them watching you do the deeds makes them glorify the Father in heaven. Newsflash, it's all about glorifying the Father in heaven. How many of y'all like show and tell? We all like show and tell. Quit lying. We grew up doing show and tell. Here's the problem. As Christians, we like to have tell and tell. I'm going to tell you about Jesus, and if I don't get you, I'm going to tell you again. And if you let me talk to you again, I'm going to tell you again. Well, you understand show and tell works much better than tell and tell. You got to have them both. You got to show people who Jesus is. And you don't show people who Jesus is by just driving by and telling them who Jesus is. You show people who Jesus is by having a relationship with them and digging into their lives and getting close, having them ask questions. And when they ask questions, you get to tell. There you go, tell. Tell us usually always an answer to a question. And by your lives, you're generating questions. That's what this thing's about. Showing and then telling. Listen, a living example is far better than a lengthy explanation. So I tell you, have you ever listened to somebody tell you how to do something and it gets really, really long? And finally you're like, listen, show me. Right? That's what the world is telling you all the time. We're out there just telling them what's wrong with them. Or we're telling them what Jesus has for them. We're telling them, and the world's out there going, hey, just show me. Why don't you just show me? We don't get it. Matter of fact, don't even want it. Why don't you show me? It's proven. As we show, and they come back and give us an opportunity to tell. Showing, telling. So together, you're the salt of the earth. It preserves, it protects. You're the light of the world. It directs. That's what light does. It dispels that darkness, gives some direction. So, protect and direct. Protect and direct. This world that God has placed us in, strategically, to be salt and light, by simply living out your life, have an overflow of what Jesus is doing on the inside of you. Just being salt and light. We're done. Let's go. We encourage you tonight to have a Sabbath time for us. It means with family, spending that day reflecting on Jesus and what he's done and having time together. Then look at the bulletin and things that are going on this week we want you to be a part of while you're in town. Your family. As we dismiss today, I encourage you to go and be salt and light, but understand what that is out there to her. Angela, would you dismiss us?